Good afternoon from Playa del Carmen, Mexico. I have spent 8 days trying to get settled and finally found some Wi-Fi and a table far enough away from people that aren't yelling, and here we are. So today I'm with Kathy Bochonko, who I met 2 weeks ago. I'm certainly followed you on YouTube and aware of you, but we met, I think, in Dr. Eleanor's webinar, didn't we?
We actually met, I know, because I just some other things going on, but it's been about a month now. And I met you when I was exposed to you when you interviewed Dr. Eleanor. Someone shared that video on Facebook and I watched that and my mind kind of exploded. And then I did join the very next week's webinar with Dr. Eleanor Haspel-Portner. And then you and I connected after that. Yeah.
Cool.
So that
and here we
that
are.
was in the middle of April.
Time's flying. I literally came to Mexico with as a last minute effort, and I saw Wi-Fi on the website and thought, oh, of course it'd be great, and made all these plans. But it was just I just needed to get the hell out of Victoria at the time.
Right.
Here I am off to my usual great start. Why don't you take a second and introduce yourself? I put a little bit in the description, but for those that don't know you, what would you say about yourself in 30 seconds or less? And go.
Oh, I can't say anything in 30 seconds or less because the main thing, if you ever forget who I am, I'm Chatty Kathy. Okay. I am, for those of you who are in the human design world, I'm a 6'2" emotional projector. And I found human design in the third phase of being a 6 line. So that means later in life. And I've reinvented myself completely in this, past Chiron return phase of my life. I am now an intuitive human design mentor, and I have a Facebook group called Intuitive Human Design, and I work with clients. And my favorite thing in the world, I love working with my clients too, but my big passion right now is I have a podcast called Real Human Design Stories, where I talk to people about their experiments and they just take on a life of themselves. And I love that I talk about anybody from people who nobody's ever heard of to I've talked to Chetan Parkin and Karen Curry Parker, and I'm talking to Dr. Eleanor Haspel-Portner this summer and whatever. That was probably way over 30 seconds already. So
That's cool. Well, and I noticed you talked to Karen Curry Parker yesterday. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
I actually talked to her on Sunday. I do all of them live on Sundays, and the podcast drop and go live on YouTube on Monday. So if you're in my group, you get to watch it while it's happening, comment if you like. And then they go live on Monday. But yeah, it dropped last night at 5:00. So it's
Cool.
I thought it was really great. There's, she's one of those people who sometimes is a little polarizing. People love her, and other people think she did something wrong by changing human design. And it's really interesting when you hear her tell her whole story of how that all evolved. So anyway, I'm biased though.
I'm right there with you. And what do I want to say to that? Many things. One is, well, you're doing a professional version of what I do, which is pretty much just like, hey, this person seems cool, let's chat. But
well, that's how mine started, Sean. And then I kept having people refer to it as my podcast. And I'm like, it's not a podcast. It's just Sunday Story Hour in my group on Sundays. And I put them on YouTube because I knew they were good for people to be able to find. And then finally, I had a voice in my head that kept saying, who do you think you are? Because I kept thinking, well, I need to make these into podcasts. I want to make them into professional podcasts. And I didn't have the energy to do it or the skills. And I wound up investing in having somebody take 30 episodes and convert them into podcast format and start my podcast stuff and get those all on YouTube. And I was like, oh, wow, this is so nice. But there was still that voice in my head saying, who do you think you are spending all this money? Nobody wants to hear what you want to say. And then the funniest thing is Karen Curry Parker talked about how she still has that voice in her head that says, nobody wants to hear what you have to say. So
relief when you hear other people say it, when you assume that their inside voice is fine on that topic, right?
yeah, right. It's all of
Yeah.
us that have it. And so if it resonates, if your sacral says yes, then make it a podcast. But if not, keep doing what you're doing as long as it's fun, right?
Yep, totally. Um, well, I don't want to, because I haven't seen the Karen Curry Parker episode yet. I don't want to ask you questions about it, but I will. Yeah, that polarizing thing. This is what I'm going through. I stumbled across Dr. Eleanor's work a couple, maybe 3 months ago now, maybe not quite that long, and we've become friends. And it's very interesting. I feel like I'm a shock absorber for her as she's kind of being reacquainted with the community. Like, she stepped back, got into her work, was really focused on it, and then was like, I'm ready to share this stuff. But, a lot of human design, I want to say complacent folks that just only are hearing one radio band, don't want to hear from someone new. And I'm actually finding at times when I share Dr. Eller's work, I get attacked for daring to, like, there's another voice than Roz, right? Who received a channeled message, but ultimately is still just a human being sharing his interpretation of what channeled through him, right? And so I,
Mm-hmm.
I, I see people ripping on people that have taken the mutation and went, this part doesn't feel right. Or, like, even I've never actually sat any of Karen Curry Parker's courses, but I do have her flashcards, which actually I think are fantastic. Her little sort of tarot deck thing; those are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I was almost ready to abandon human design probably 4 months in. Like, I was like, I feel like I'm joining Scientology. The hell is this thing? Like, all this stuff, right? Like, all the weird sci-fi video imagery. It was just a real turnoff. But
Yeah, I did that too.
yeah, but like, I got a third reading from a woman, and she was. I didn't know at the time she was into quantum human design. But when she presented what a manifesting generator was, and the language used, I felt empowered, and I was like, okay, this deserves another look. And that's actually what pulled me back in, was that languaging. And I think I've always been
Yeah.
searching for something else. Like, the Jovian channel doesn't resonate for me, or at least parts of it. So.
Yeah. So, um, I really feel that anytime someone tells you what you should think, you should run the other way. And I think that's true of human design. And so, like, when I work with clients, I don't teach them what they should think about their design or how their design works. I empower them to trust what they're feeling in their body and to explore it in ways that help them to learn to radically trust themselves, right? And my big theme is radical self-trust. So when you start talking about labels and putting people into boxes, whether it's me having to put myself in a box because I'm a projector and I shouldn't speak first because you didn't invite me to speak. I mean, I'm sorry. No, right? My energy is something I respect, and I'm not going to just talk to you about something that you clearly have no interest in.
Mhm.
But I can approach a subject with you, and I can judge whether your sacral is open by asking would you like me to talk about this? If I'm not sure, I can then do that. But I can usually see it on your face if you want to know more, right? We can feel each other's energy. I can feel your sacral without having to hear the uh-huh or the yes. I can see you nodding. So all these limiting things that I was originally learning when I was self-studying with human design that got me and they were hitting home in so many ways. They really resonated. But what was happening is because so many of them resonated, and then I was getting the message that if this, then this, and it was still this whole this thing we do in the world that's just so obvious is we decide what's good and what's bad, what's
Mhm.
black and what's white. Are you my camp? Are you one of us? Or are you one of them? The binary thinking, this idea that if you disagree with me, now you are no good. I'm going to cast you out, right? Because you have you know, a different favorite color than I do, whatever it is, you know, the way we identify the identity politics and all that stuff. And that was happening big time in human design. You know, if you don't agree with Ra, well, most of the people who worked with Ra originally at least didn't agree with him on some things, right? But now that he's not here to say, well, yeah, no, that's okay, or yeah, blah, 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 everybody feels like they have to completely just, it's almost like with their fundamentalists, right? Like with the Bible, you know, the way people got with that. So I'm not a fundamentalist in any way, shape, or form. I absolutely adore Karen Curry Parker, but I don't consider myself a quantum human design specialist. I have referred to myself as an intuitive human design mentor because I use a combination of my intuition and the things that I have learned through human design and other stuff too. I mean, there's a lot to learn out there that's not human design related that can really help us know and trust ourselves. And but the human design chart is such a beautiful map directory of where to start and where to look where something might be getting stuck. So that was a little monologue. I'll pause. So, but I feel, you know, give you something to respond to in any of that. If
That's my challenge. I have squirrel brain. You've seen my chart, so I'll respond to the
okay, I'm
last
gonna
thing that
can
popped into my head. Oh, go ahead.
okay, and then I'll respond to the squirrel brain because I have the open ajna also. But go ahead.
Okay,
What's the
perfect.
last thing?
Well, I've the Four Agreements. I don't know if you're familiar with the Four
Yes,
Agreements, Don Miguel's
yes,
book. So I've had this book for a year, and being a 3/5 MG, I was immediately saw the four of them, and I was like, exactly, love it. Never read the book, just had the book, and it was like, I'll get to it.
right.
So last one I finally got to the book, and I only got through the introduction, but the introduction of the book basically talks about conditioning. Like it was I literally, I'm sure Ra read that book, and I flipped the cover and it was like, oh, it was actually published in 1957. And there's so many people I've talked to and things that I've heard and seen that, is like, what is being channeled and what is it that he read and his brain morphed into the message, right? And I know he listened to a lot of or read a lot of Manly P. Hall as well. So like a Mason that of the 33rd level, and it's just really interesting that these are actually people I've already been intrigued by, and I'm finding his phrasing and wording coming from their works as I flip through it. So why am I telling you that? There was a reason why that just popped into my head, but it was, oh yeah, just that human design is kind of the blueprint or the uh, the math, but then there's still all the elements around how you utilize that content and then apply it with whatever other things interest you to express yourself best, I guess. And the Four
Well,
Agreements for me is one that's just, being impeccable with your word is
yeah,
3 years in human design. I'm like, I noticed that with I noticed that with people in human design that have been in at least, let's say 6, 7, 8 years, they have an interesting characteristic in that they pause. You can hear them reach for a word. Like Leanne Wolf, for example, is one that like you'll hear and she'll be like da 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 da, and then you can just hear this pause, and then she's being very careful because the word you use can come back and bite you in the ass. Like literally, just the slightly different wording, and you know that the person on the other end is going to hear it, interpret it, and it's going to be like, oh shit, that's going to be a problem a month down the line, right? Because this like intelligence around wording.
can I interrupt for a minute? Because I
Sure.
have a very different take on that. Words have so much power. Words create our reality. So I have never worried, I shouldn't say never. I do not currently worry, oh, that's going to come back and bite me in the ass because, as I've told you beforehand, everything is always happening for my greatest expansion, even when it sucks. So if it comes and bites me in the ass, it's because I needed to be bitten in the ass for me to expand. So what I think of when I think about how important it is words create a reality. And so when I say I'm struggling with this ability to control my squirrel brain or da da da, I am creating this reality, right? So this, and that is something when you said the whole thing about squirrel brain, that is a thing I've really been focusing on relanguaging. So I have a completely open ajna, which I know you do as well. And the not self theme there is this needing to be certain. But we are not meant to hold anything other than space. We're meant to hold space for all ideas. We amplify all ideas and thoughts. And it's really this beautiful, amazing thing because it like sends them out bigger back to whoever they had them. It like helps people to have bigger ideas. So if we're amplifying ideas from a place of fear, that's not good, right? So we're amplifying from this sense of, knowing and trusting ourselves, and the kinds of things I say need to be reflective of that. So there's a history in my family. My mother and my grandmother on her side both had dementia, and I've had 4 concussions. So I used to make all kinds of jokes about anytime I'd forget anything. And I used to tell my daughter, no, I can't do that because if I fall again, you're going to be feeding me through a straw, right? And all this stuff, because I just had this narrative I would tell that I was destined to not have good cognitive skills. And I now know that I have amazing cognitive skills, but there's so much in there because it's holding space for everything that it's not there until it needs to be there because there's so much. So now I don't use that language of fear and struggle and whatever because it just perpetuates that whole idea. Does that make sense?
100%. I mean, right back to the word should that you were talking about earlier. Like as soon as I hear the word should, it's like, wait, is this for me or is this someone
Yeah.
wanting to feel better about themselves because they did something that made them feel worthy? And because I used to should people all the time, a big old open heart. Had no idea the damage I could cause just by parroting someone else's experience, not my own. So I'm
Yeah.
very careful about that these days. Um,
Yeah.
okay, well, so we're gonna keep jumping around, but
No
so you're a six.
problem.
My wife's a 6'2". My wife's mom is a 6'2". Um, I'm no doctor. I don't have the stats, but I'm a good pattern matcher, and I am seeing a trend in especially 6 lines and dementia and Alzheimer's. So much so that I keep asking people questions. And a friend of mine, Shane, works at a place where he's in a home and is familiar with human design. And night, I was just like, can you just like of the guests that you have that are 6 lines, how many of them are there with dementia? And he checked it and was like, every one of them. Like there is something to that coming off the roof, and I think it's kind of like a complacency, right? You get complacent on the roof and you either come down or you don't. And I've also heard, i don't want to I don't want to guess who suggested to me because I don't remember, but there was this idea that a lot of 6s don't make it past 60. They just
Yeah.
actually get complacent, even if that means just not going
Well, the
through that
universe,
difficulties.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ra, I believe, said the universe does not want to allow incorrect role models. So we
Oh,
often will wind up just stopping to exist. But I don't want to interrupt, but I really would love to say something about the dementia 6-line connection. It makes a lot of sense because there are metaphysical connections between memory loss and people who have some undealt with trauma, something that they're repressing that they do not want to remember. So in trying to forget the trauma, they suppress memories so much that their brain starts to misfire and just says, oh, we don't remember this. We don't remember, and as a 6th line, the role model is to confront the trauma in a way, I don't know if confront's the right word, face the
address.
trauma for sure,
Yeah.
address the trauma from a place of love, right? Because the biggest thing that I have really started to feel in human design is that everything we do is about calibrating a bigger sense of love for ourselves and our connectedness to the world. And as we calibrate that through the way we address our own energetic needs and that of others, we draw things to us that are of that same frequency, right? So if we are going from a place of fear, we're just misfiring, and there's all this stuff now that's happening that's showing us how many people are embracing these amazing abilities to connect with source through channel and other things, through other beings, through channeling and different metaphysical gifts that people are finding. There's just so much going on that, when we start, anytime we get stuck in the fear, we're limiting ourselves. So, yeah, that
Um,
seems.
because you again sent my brain in a bunch of different ways. I want to just cap off one more thing on that 6-2 and
Mhm.
dementia thing. The other pattern, just in case anyone's listening, check your teeth, check your gums, check your mouth oral care. There's absolutely, I cannot be more convinced now that there's a connection between either gum disease or dental involved in this. And I say that from several experiences, several observations, including in the 5-MeO DMT experience that I basically reversed a root canal and realized how how much it was empowering me. And in that experience, it was like I actually reversed the root canal. Like it was supposed to be done the next week, and I went back and she's like, your tooth is fine, because I had actually like felt it, detected it, used CBD, massaged my gums. It was excruciating, and out came some stuff, and then I didn't need a root canal anymore. But in that same experience, I was being told that I had metal in my mouth, and sure enough, there was one filling that was still at the top, and my cognitive everything opened up 6 weeks later, just by getting rid of what was nagging pains that I was ignoring. And my mother-in-law had all of her teeth taken out when she was like 20. Like that's I don't know if that's she chose to or whatever, but she just had a whole lifetime of not only reasons to maybe want to stay on the roof of trauma and various things that I won't get into here, but she also had extreme dental challenges and still does, which is also challenging for my wife to deal with when she's got dementia, because she doesn't remember that her teeth hurt yesterday and why she's at the dentist today. So it's just this constant, struggle. And
Yeah.
in moments with her, I can tell she's gone, and in other moments I can tell she's still there. And so it's that sort of that disconnect, the misfire. There's I personally feel we can bring some of these people back, but I don't want to make any claims that I can't support.
Well,
And but
I was just about to interrupt you and say that I do think it's important that we don't in any way give the idea that if you're a sixth line, these are your things that you're destined to have happen. But because the awareness of potentialities just gives us an idea of when we start to see something, we're like, oh, this is a sign that maybe I'm off track. How can I welcome this sign and deal with it and, move forward in an aligned way? And when you were talking about the teeth thing, now I don't know what my grandmother's chart was, because, she was, I'm no spring chicken, and even my mom's, we just have a guesstimate of the time. And I'm pretty sure my mom I know she was a 6th line. I can't remember if she was a 4-6 or 6-2 without looking at it, because I haven't looked at it in a while. She's been passed since 2012. But my grandmother, the last time I remember seeing her in the nursing home when I came in and when she could still speak, she lived to be 97 with her dementia. So it's not like she had early onset or anything. But I remember her saying hello and not really sure who I was, but grabbing me by the face like this and saying, "You have nice teeth. Take care of your teeth."
mm,
Like that. And I was just like, okay. And I'm sitting here looking, I don't have such nice teeth anymore, but I do try to take care of my teeth. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things I've read, like, I forget the author's name, but that book about breath where he talks about the shape of our mouths. And, there's a whole trend now where people are learning about mewing. Have you heard about mewing?
I remember
Where you
about
put
mewing.
Mewing's where you put your tongue on the David Nessner, I think is the guy's name that wrote the book. I don't know, might not be, but mewing is where you put your tongue on the top of your mouth and you swallow where your tongue is making contact, and that is the correct way that you're supposed to swallow. And the more we do it, the more it's supposed to give us a good jawline. So it's like a whole TikTok thing that the kids will be like, hold on, because you're supposed to do it so many times in a day. And they'll tell, there's some teacher I follow who makes fun of his students, and he's like, you're talking, this is the sign to say, hold on, I'm mewing. But it's the idea that if you swallow this correct way your whole life, you broaden your jaw to where your teeth will fit normally. And it's because so many of us wind up becoming mouth breathers, especially when we sleep, that our jaws get too small. And I have actually had that issue and have had to go through, or have chosen to go through, some things with a holistic dentist to expand my palate and fix some of that, because the sleep apnea was causing this restricted airway, which was really like, I honestly, and this does relate to what you were saying, is, so I started my human design business, like I was in human design, but I didn't do it as a business. And I was still stuck in the bitter projector, nobody's invited me to start a business kind of thing. And it was probably like, I don't know, the fall, like a couple months before my 58th birthday. So I just turned 60 this last November. So about 2.5 years ago. And I remember, I remember waking up and just like I'd had another horrible night's sleep, and I just was like, I'm gonna die. Like I feel like I'm just gonna die from not being able to sleep well. And that was right around the time I was starting to see that dentist. And I actually had a voice in my head that said, not in these exact words, because it wasn't really words, it was just this feeling, you're gonna die because you're choosing not to live. And that's when I knew I was really stuck in that projector bitterness, kind of like waiting for someone to come and hand me a life, give me the things I wanted and invite me into the right relationships and the right things. And meanwhile, I was just hermiting, right, as this second line. And that's when I really started to say, what do I want to do? And how am I going to do it? And then the big thing that came after that was, okay, well, how am I going to do this in a way that isn't, requiring other people? Like, you have to wait for the invitation. My husband had not invited me to start a business and take our retirement savings. We, at that point, were both retired. And that was the whole idea of it, was stressing him out, right? So then I was like, well, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to do it in a way that's not imposing on his energy, and then making myself a victim of what he will let me do, right? Which is a very common thing we do in a marriage, where we'll say, well, my wife won't let me, or my husband won't let me. And what we really mean is, I'm not prepared. This is not important enough to me. And it might not be, but it's usually, this is not important enough to me to figure out how to have the conversation in a way that respects the needs of my partner. And I find a way to make this happen, right? And so I had to look at it and say, how can I make this happen in a way that respects the fact that my 5-1 manifesting generator husband had worked his ass off and made all these very informed, very deeply researched, right, first line decisions to decide when we could afford to retire, and made sure that we could, like, this man dotted all of the I's and crossed all of his T's and everything, right? So if you said something, he'd be like, that's not in the plan, right? And I would get mad about that. And I'm like, what? I can't, like, I don't get to have a dream anymore because it's not in the plan. But what I realized is I just had to find the way to make it not impact the thing, which I did, which is a whole nother story. I figured out a way to make things happen. But why did we start talking about this? Oh, because I felt like I was going to die. And then I just started doing stuff. I just started living. And I just started saying, I'm going to do this. Do you want to do it with me? No? Okay, I'm going to go. Like I would go on a vacation down to Florida where our daughter lives, and I'm going to go see Sonia, and you don't want to come? Okay. You want to come? Okay. We're here. I'm going to go down into town. You don't have, like, instead of, I didn't have to, I wasn't it's this not being attached to the energy was the thing. Like I could invite him to come, but I couldn't have any expectation or need for him to come. That's the
Hmm.
difference with the projector energy that I found was I was going to do what made me feel aligned and alive. And yeah, there are times he'd invite me to do something and I would decide, is this invitation something I want to do? Or is being with him in this moment something I want to do enough that I'll do the thing I don't want to do? You know what I mean? So I just started looking at being a projector very differently at that point.
Hmm.
And that's when I feel like everything really started to shift. So, and now I try really hard. And try is a word that's kind of tricky to do. But I am, yeah, it's like probably not the best word. What's the better word?
Effort.
My goal, no, I don't know. That still sounds too hard. My goal is to not have goals. Not like to
Sorry,
have
a
like
truck just went
loosely,
by. Oh, not have goals?
yeah,
Oh,
nothing too
okay.
structured. Like I have a goal for a feeling. Like I have a goal, like I'm a projector, I want success. But if I start to define what success looks like, then my mind starts limiting the universe.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
success is a feeling, right? And I'm just open to that feeling of success in whatever shape or form it's going to be like. And then there's these moments where you start to get into the fear, right? The fear of like, well, what if success means I don't have any friends? Well, then is that part of success? Maybe success is new friends. Maybe success is friends who come back when they see that what you did that seemed scary to them, you survived. I don't know. Like everything is happening for me, even if it sucks in the moment.
hmm.
So anyway, another long ramble. Chatty Kathy.
Well, no, and there's a bunch of stuff I want to touch on there. How long have you been married?
28 years.
Okay. And your husband, how into the experiment is he? He's a uh, forced participant, or he's digging it
No,
after 8 years?
he is not a forced participant. He is a passive bystander.
Okay. Yeah, so
And in
similar.
some ways, he is an inactive beneficiary because I have realized so many things that in
Yep.
later that have benefited him. Like the whole idea of like, so you're undefined emotionally, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is your wife defined?
We have the same open centers. We're both
Oh,
MGs.
you do.
She's a
And
6'2".
do you define any centers together?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you define any centers together through your electromagnetics?
I'd have to look again, but I think we do. I think our solar plexus and root are defined. Actually, I think no, our head and ajna couldn't be defined. So yeah, I think solar plexus and roots.
Yeah, so that's big because that changes the theme in your relationship is now emotional, even though both of you are sacral in the moment. Your relationship needs time for clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, a tricky thing to practice. And so for my husband, who has a completely open solar plexus, and I have the 3955, which is the channel of emoting in deeply individual emotional wave. I have realized that I can't process emotions with him. Well, now I can a little bit because I know better, but in the beginning, I just couldn't because he just amplified all the worst of it in me, right? Because his energy did. It wasn't anything he was doing, and he didn't know what to do with it. And as I was just kind of throwing that wave around because I didn't even know how to deal with it, right? I was thinking my wave was something I was supposed to manage or fix rather than experience. And so when I would need to make an emotional decision, for example, like even this thing about the starting a business, when I started to feel that and have all these ideas of what I wanted to do, I knew I had to wait for clarity, but I couldn't talk to him about any of it. And some people will be like, well, that sucks. Well, no, because it's happening for me for my grace expansion. So it was great. I had to find the safe people that I could talk to that weren't involved in the decision when I needed to process stuff, because as projectors, we need to process a lot of times verbally. And so then when I knew that I wanted to do this, Apple does these little
Have you seen
hand
this too? If
gestures,
we do
right?
this, we'll get some balloons
Yeah.
here in a second. Yeah, there you go.
Right. Yeah, I know them all. Here's my favorite. My favorite one is this
You
one.
can do
Where's it
double
go?
horns? Oh, wow.
You
Oh,
don't know
that's
that
new.
one? Yeah,
Well,
you
I
just
tried it yesterday. It doesn't work with a single, so
yeah, you
that's
gotta
good to
go.
know.
You gotta do two for that one. And then
Up your kilt doesn't work. That much I know.
what?
Up your kilt doesn't work, but
No. Then you got this
there we
one,
go.
and then you got this one. Wait, I don't know.
Oh, that's
All right. Wait, what's that
okay.
one gonna do? All right, I'm diverse. Okay. So anyway, I wound up talking to him about the decision after I kind of felt I had moved to clarity. And so it was because in a relationship, it's still important to not just, I believe it's important to not just be like, I'm going to do this important thing that's going to impact our lives and you just have to deal with it. Like, I don't know that that feels right to me. So I said, here's what's going on. This is how I feel. This is what I think I want to do. I've really thought about it, wondering your thoughts on it. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you where I'm at, and I'd like to know what you think.
Mhm.
And we had that conversation, and it was very different because in the past, what would happen as somebody with emotional authority is I would say, let's say there's two choices, right? Let's just take two black and white choices. Like, should I start a business or should I not start a business? And obviously it wasn't that black and white, and let's say I'm like, and I don't really know what I want to do because blah, blah, blah versus blah, blah, blah. And he would say, well, blah, he's a manifesting generator, sacral authority, and he has the 1762, which connects his ajna to his throat through logical channels. So instead of a yes, no
There's a
response,
yummy Coke in the way. Thanks. Sorry. Yes, please.
instead of a yes, no response from his sacral, you get a logical question 9
Yep.
times out of 10. His
Mhm.
response is a question. So what would happen is he would always ask the logical question, and the logical question always had he always had one thing he thought was the logical right thing to do is what he would do, and he knows in the moment usually what he would do. So I would have to defend the other side as being a viable option because I still didn't have clarity. So I would be explaining why I felt the way I did about the other thing that made no sense to him because it usually was not logical to him. So in the course of these conversations, when I'm trying to make a decision, I would so heavily have to defend the side he didn't see as the right thing that it felt like I had already decided to him.
Mhm.
And then he would be blown away if I didn't choose the one thing. And he'd be like it would bother him because he felt like he had already invested so much in trying to accept the fact that I was going to do this thing that he thought was illogical and wrong. And it was just such this process that I realized when I could look at the chart, I could see the energy of it. And I was like, this isn't something he's making a choice to do. This is how his energy works. And how can I ask him to acknowledge my process and how my energy works if I'm not willing to do the same with his? So that really was a huge thing that has shifted how we deal with things in the moment. Plus, we have the electromagnetic that forms the channel of struggle.
That's
So
2838. Yeah.
yes, I have the
Mhm.
38 and he has the 28. So I'm always picking the fights, right? I'm always, and I have the 39 too, which is I have the 3955. So I have that provoking energy. So there's a lot of stuff that that he has benefited from my ability to understand from an energetic way because I was the person who would never walk away from an argument. I would be up in his face. If he needed to pull back, I know my wave would not let it go. And, that all changed when I started to understand why I felt like, and there are still times I have to tell him, listen, I understand how you are, but this is really hard. It makes me feel really unimportant that you don't at least like mentally try to make an effort to
Mhm.
occasionally, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
We
but
could we could have a whole chat about deconditioning and having been in a relationship for a long time. So my wife and I will be married 29 years next month. So similar time frame. And as you're talking, I'm just kind of like rattling through things. And at one point you were like, I have said to several people in the past, and now I know it doesn't really work, but it got results. Which is, I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you that this is going to happen, right? Where you just kind of reach a wall and you're like, so, but I went for a walk with my friend Nathan Garrison about a month ago, and he's actually one of the main people behind Neutrino Design. Turns out he's
mhm.
also my massage therapist, my pickleball partner, and lives 20 minutes from my house. So I have amazing access to a resource and a
Wow.
really cool guy. Like talk about fractal. He was like saw me on Facebook. He's like, hey, you live down the road, and we've connected since then. But in a conversation with him one day, he said something that was so simple and profound, and it was one of these conversations like I'm really frustrated. My wife and I are on the same page in this stuff, and for whatever reason, he said, "Well, why don't you just change the phrase 'I love you, but' to 'I love you and I need'?" And it was such a simple, respectful phrase. The other person was like, "I love you, and I need to be doing this, or I need to." And we've actually like been planning to do vacations separately sometimes. So, our relationship theme is definitely break the bond and reset, and so we're exploring that in lots of ways in our life. But even vacation, I almost came to Mexico by myself because I was just like, I need to get out of Victoria. It was suffocating me, the gray and the bleakness, and I was just ready to get on a clock tower and start picking people
You
off.
have you have a
So
lot of individual energy, so
yeah.
that is very mutative and I know you're a musician, right? I shouldn't say I know. I think you're a musician,
Drummer.
right? So
Yeah.
there's all that acoustic, that being alone kind of thing. And yeah, I'm interesting. So is your wife a willing participant or is she a
Um, she is more now. So we're 3.5 years in.
mhm,
Um, I would say I was definitely one of those people in the took 3 months, 4 months till I was like, oh, I got the bug. Kind of started with the Enneagram and various other things because I had this weekend that was profound, and it just like all of a sudden I was a searcher. But human
right?
design kind of hooked me a little bit. And I think I mentioned earlier, kind of went through this phase where I was just rejecting it. Once I was like sort of got a hook in me, I couldn't stop trying to fix everybody for about 6 months. So I definitely turned my wife off of it and anyone else that was in my orbit. And I've since learned not to do that. So I set her off on the wrong start. But recently, yeah, I think she's curious. We actually own thank you very much, a wellness, not a wellness center, but we call it a place of curiosity in Brentwood. And so it's a small community. We've got yoga, we've got breath work, sound, all sorts of things that we're interested in. And we've been doing little human design info nights. And we did one last week as kind of a retreat. My wife hung out for an hour and a half. And it was the first time I really saw her kind of engaged. And even this week, she's made a couple of comments, and I'm even getting her to try to describe what she knows about it. So it's been an interesting little thing.
What state are you in?
Oh,
Which
sorry,
Brentwood?
sorry. Can I just get for 1 second?
Oh, to be in Mexico.
Yeah, it's hard to do a podcast here. Everything is the internet, people wandering up. I think I sent you a
Right?
picture earlier. I sat at a table and there was nobody here. There's
Right?
20 empty tables, and a group of 8 people that grew to 15 decided to move the table next to me and actually move closer to me. And I had a laptop, and I was like, literally, I'm the only person in the room. What are you doing? And then they just start talking. I'm like, I had to just get up and leave.
See, when I'm on the road, I always do them in my room, but we usually
The
stay in
internet's there is
Airbnbs.
really bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
So yeah, I was on when I was doing my podcast with Chitan Parkin. I was in an Airbnb, and in the middle of the podcast, the Wi-Fi dropped me, and we're streaming live into my Facebook group, and people are watching, and all of a sudden he's just like sitting there. And it was funny because I didn't even realize that the call was still live in the group. So when I joined back in and he was there, I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to get us back in, and da da da. And I'm saying all this stuff to him, and meanwhile, then I see that people are posting and saying you're live, and I was like, oh. So when I went back and I looked at the replay or whatever, it was funny because he's just like sitting there, and it was pretty quick, but and that's another reason why I'm glad I used the guy to do my podcast, because he fixed all that so that in the YouTube version of it, we're missing all that comic stuff. But yeah, that's the only time I've ever had an issue with the Wi-Fi for. But I was asking, you said you live in Brentwood, and I forgot, what state are you in?
Oh, I'm in Canada, so that's Brentwood Bay,
Oh,
Vancouver Island.
Oh,
So
you're
we're
in
very close to
Canada.
Victoria. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And you know what? Like, there seems to be little hot spots of where things are happening, and it turns out like it's Raw. There's a Facebook page that's like a memorial for Raw, and you know how you can sort of see like born, got married, like those kind of statuses in Facebook. It only lists 3 places, but one of them is Saanich, where I live. So apparently he lived in Saanich the year I was born, and so he like lived in
Really?
that area. Yeah, and then of course Nathan lives down the street. His dad is Ted Garrison, and he's in pictures like standing in the back with Raw in the early days. And I went for a
Oh,
walk with him 2 weeks ago, and we went into this park, and that was like a whole trippy experience. But then,
I don't
why
think
am I
I've
telling
seen
this?
that page for, I'll have to.
Well, and there might be dozens of them, but all I know is I searched for them. It had a memoriam. It had some pictures and images of things. It had a picture of him in his casket. Like someone had made some sort of like
Ooh.
page, memorial page. But he's lived in lots of places. It didn't even list Ibiza, but it lists Saanich, and Saanich is very specific. It is not a big area. It's not even easy to spell. You know what I mean? Like I was like, is that AI messing with my brain, or did he actually live here? And why was it the year I was born? I didn't live there, but I migrated there, right? And then, and so I'll just ramble for a sec. But I did a human design kind of intro night. I've done about 4 of them, and the second one, this guy rolls in off the street, uninvited, didn't pay, didn't register, but rolls in, and turns out he had a reading from Ra like 27 years ago when he was in Hawaii or something, and then has just lived his life, and then was like, ah, cool, this human design thing, I remember that. And he rolls in, and he's just like hanging out, telling stories about Ron. And he was like, what are you doing in my neighborhood? And I've texted him, can't find him, he's not responding, like he just vanished
Do you
back
remember
into the
his
ether
name?
again. I'd have to look. I think it was Chris. Um,
Huh.
I think it was Chris. I could probably dig it up, but yeah. But this is fractals, and it's a very interesting world when you start making connections, and what happens, right? Even my connection
Yeah.
with Dr. Eleanor, like I stumbled across her stuff about 4 months ago, and I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. Mentally earmarked it, but then moved on. 4 weeks later, it was back again. It was like, pay attention. I reach out to her, and she replies saying, oh, yeah, someone was watching your podcast and really loves your content. And I'm thinking, I have like 50 subscribers. Like, who is this person she's talking about? I still think she mistook me for someone, because she gave me one of those free readings initially. And the whole time she kept calling me Sam and had my wrong birth data. And so I was like, are you sure you're meant to be talking to me? But sure enough, we keep talking and
That's
end up
funny.
having a
She had
great
the wrong chart
conversation,
up
right?
for me at first too. And then
Yeah.
and it was funny because I was like, oh, I actually know her. But
Oh,
anyway,
someone else's chart she had up.
yeah, she had
Oh,
someone else's chart up for me, and was
no, that's interesting.
just for a minute.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
So,
So
but how we're meeting, it's fascinating. So like here I am talking
yeah,
to you, right? Like
right.
you've been on my radar, but like certain things I'm like, oh, gotta talk to this person right now. And then I was like, yeah, that'll be cool one day. And then here we are. So
Well, I don't know. I know I've seen something of yours somewhere, or because when I watched your podcast with Dr. Eleanor, I remembered having a sense of, oh, he's familiar. I don't know who, but I don't have any memory of what that was. But watching that podcast was a thing that a few years ago would have really sent me kind of spiraling because, and I think this is kind of an open ajna thing too, that needing to be certain, right? Whereas I kept trying to figure out what to do with what she was telling me or what she was what she was saying, because she was saying things that were disputing beliefs that I held to be true in a way that I didn't know what to do with, right? And I still don't know what to do with some of it. And so there in the past, I would have had to say, well, I don't agree with that. And then there was even a part of me that was like, well, does that mean I have to stop teaching human design the way I teach it? Because if I'm even thinking that this might be true or whatever, because so backing up a little bit, I had heard of Dr. Eleanor mostly through the idea of the angelic matrix. I had heard the angelic matrix referenced by Karen Curry Parker. And then I also am a big fan of Kim Gould, who I've had on my podcast. And she's Australian and she does all this work with feminine archetypes and asteroids in the human design chart. And she uses 8 charts.
Okay.
Like Dr. Eleanor does. She has this whole human design software system, Tarcola or something it's called, where you can run your charts and not only see the different progressions, but you can also see where all these different asteroids and mini planetoids and things are in your chart. And her stuff has always been fascinating. Like her blog posts, I joked when my sister sent me one. My sister is a manifesting generator. And she sent me stuff and she's like, wasn't it cool? And I'd be like, yeah, but I'm still reading it. She's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, this part here. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, then there was this. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, because I would read the whole post and all the little glyphs and I would like click on every little link to this other article that goes into this part deeper. And I felt like every blog post was a college course, right? And my sister would like skim it and be like, oh, that's cool, right? And she would, that's the difference between projector and, you know, the manifesting generator energy. But so I've always loved Kim Gould stuff and I've looked into it a little bit, but I knew it's something that just took more energy than I had at this point in time. And so when I started hearing Dr. Eleanor talking about these things on your podcast, and she would say, the research doesn't support this. And I still haven't had the conversation with her that I want to have, which is explain to me what the research looked like. Like, how did you research profile lines? Because honestly, if you had researched somebody who's not in their experiment and you're talking to them about, you know, the profiles, like that doesn't mean they're actually not living trying to be the profile that their mother was or that their husband is or whatever. People try to be who they think the world wants them to be, right? And so I don't know how her research of what she did really, you know, because she said the profile lines didn't hold up. I know in every core of my being that being a 6'2" resonates. But I also can say that, and this is a thing Karen Curry Parker teaches big time, is we all have all of the chart. So as I get deeper and deeper into my experiment, all of the chart is starting to resonate with me. Because where we're open, we're here to get wise, right? That's where we're here to learn about it. So I'm here, and that makes it sound, to say I'm here too, that makes it sound like I'm saying that's the only reason I'm here. But one of the things in this life that I'm experiencing is gaining the wisdom of what it means to experience that first line energy, because that's open in my design sun. I have second line, or yeah, in my design sun. My personality sun is 6th line. So, you know, those other things are open. So we're experiencing it. So as a 6th line off the roof, this is something I know Ross said in one of his lectures where he talks about things like motivation and the 6th line once we're off the roof. our motivation is kind of thrown out the window because your motivation is strictly to be. There is no motivation for the other. And I'm realizing that there are still moments where I catch myself where I'm like, oh, wait, I'm trying to do this for something because I'm guilt motivation is what my chart says, right? So it's all about helping and fixing. And then I worry when I would not help that I'm getting into transference, which is hope. Like, so with my adult daughter, if I'm not helping her with her problem, am I just hoping everything is going to be okay? And then that's a problem? No, I am just being, and I'm giving her problem, and I'm loving her through it, but I'm not trying to fix it. And I'm not trying to hope it's okay. I'm trusting that it's going to be exactly what she needs it to be in that moment, because everything's happening for each of us for our greatest expansion if we allow it. And it's usually when we start trying to people please and do what the other person wants or needs, or, get messed up in all of that, that's when it all goes icky. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It
We
does.
start, yeah, I
My
know.
wife is guilt motivation. She's also guilt for her genetic trauma. So that's a whole interesting conversation. And she's a 6'2", so that could be a whole separate conversation. But let's stay within here for now. This is a
Okay.
fun little sandbox. Um, I don't want to misquote Dr. Eleanor, because I've had lots of conversations with her and just kind of bumbling through learning as I
Right.
go. But she, like, right from the beginning said, like, profile is an artifact. And that word always struck me as a strange choice of words. We were talking about words earlier. And it's like, to me, I think what she means is, like, that wasn't channeled, that was an interpretation, and profile makes sense, like, as a theme. And as a 3-5, it was like, that's what hooked me into human design, the 3-5, and being like, oh, that's why I'm such a fuck up, right? Like to me it was like, oh, finally there's like, someone that said you're normal, right? But once she said that about 8 weeks ago, I'm like, cool. That means I don't have to be a 3-5. Why am I bumping into things? And I started being strategic about the way I approach things. And I was like, well, okay, I'm always in a rush. Maybe just slow down just 5%
Oh, now you're in your head
because I'm
though.
banging into stuff. Ah, no, I don't think so. I think, no, I sense that I have choice. That's the other thing. I do have choice. I have choice in how I show up. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, I could show up possibly not slamming my foot into things because I'm in a rush, and just slow down 5% and not have that sore foot, and possibly be a little bit prepared. And so I'm strategically choosing to resist the 3-5. And, we were talking about Chiron a bit earlier. In my
So can
Chiron,
I
if you
can,
want
can
to
I
do this, oh,
interrupt you and ask you to change
sure,
the language?
sure.
Instead of resisting the 3-5, how about if you embrace the balanced aspect of the 3-5? Let go of the unbalanced aspect of the 3-5, because the 3-5 is a beautiful profile.
Hmm.
The 3-5 is, the third line is what
Rich.
is the resilience to learn from trial and error. And that is most important things come from having that tenacity to be able to keep trying until you figure out what works. And then we wouldn't have a light bulb if Thomas Edison hadn't kept trying all the different fibers and filaments to figure out what worked. He tried so many different things. And I'm sure he had third line energy in him, because otherwise most people quit. They give up.
Mhm.
But the third line will keep trying and learning from what doesn't work and pull back, break the bond, and then go back later when there's energy for it again. So embracing the tenacity of it, right? Rather than the blindly bumping into things and part of it. So, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of negative language around the third line that I don't use at all. I don't use,
Well, I
so.
appreciate that. And I have a lot of negative self-talk that has been tamed ever since. But it's uh, yeah, no, and maybe that's that individuality in me. But I am taking a different path, or at least trying it. The third line, trying it, which is I'm strategizing to at 52, and being growing up in the 70s and 80s, and my parents not having an owner's manual for this neurodivergent kid, and a giant open heart, and trying to be worthy, I'm I'm trying my own strategy at this point because it's been a hard road, um, rich with experience and frustration. Um, yeah, it was kind of a relief, honestly, because 3-5 is a label. Like when we talk about labels, it's ultimately a label as well. You know, it's the costume, it's the backpack you wear, it's the whatever. Still just another label. And I think that's kind of really why I appreciate Dr. Eleanor's work is it's way more empowering. It's you know it's that's been why I'm smitten, like
Yeah.
eager to help her get her message out in any way I can
Yeah.
because I'm just the other stuff doesn't ring true for me. And the more people I meet, like I've had chats with Chettin and Eleanor and other people that have worked with Raw, and this was a man that was broke and angry and had all these things and was learning the information by having other people pull it out of him. He didn't understand it, right? And so, but his ego also couldn't really handle reversing, going, oh, maybe I should rephrase that. You know, there's just so many things that I understand about his story, including trying to impress his dad, that and having a I'm going to call him a sociopath, but we'll go with covert narcissist in my life that wanted to impress his dad that almost ruined my life, and took me to reaching out for help. It's really dangerous stuff going on if it's not corrected. So I'm relieved there's people mutating this info. I'm relieved that other people have a voice, and I guess that's where I'm sort of in the middle of this right now, at least with Eleanor. Is I'm just grateful to have her in my orbit. Amazing
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it too. I'm just, really taking things one step at a time because I do see the beauty in human design, but, and yesterday when, I talked to Karen, we spoke for a little bit afterwards, and I was talking to her about that very fact that, some of the things that Dr. Eleanor teaches really just kind of throw things. But I know Karen had some of that same experience because like she left traditional human design because her sacral was saying yes to what Dr. Eleanor was teaching. That was
Mm.
one of her big reasons. And
So she knew. Sorry, she knew her because I didn't
oh
wasn't
yeah,
sure
yeah.
if she was familiar with work.
She shared when you listen to the podcast, but she shared how at one point she told Ross she wanted to study some of the stuff Dr. Eleanor was teaching. And Ross said, well, you're gonna have to choose. Um, and then she talked about, we don't think about how, human design has really exploded because of technology. Like back when she was working, because Karen worked for Human Design America in Sedona back in the like late 90s or something.
Mhm.
And back then they still had, she said, we had to do everything by like recording it to a flash drive and sending it to somebody. And she talked about the huge difference that it made when Chaitan wrote his book and she wrote her book. And they had their books they could send people that could explain stuff to people because, we didn't have all this stuff on the internet about it that people could run their charts and do all these things and have, and it's easy for us to just take for granted the tenacity that these people had to go, the stuff they went through and the expense they went through. And sure, now they're making a decent living, but, Chaitan, I know, talked about how they'd be sitting there like, and people would be like, you want to do what kind of reading? No, thanks. They're like, it's not like people were beating down the doors to give them money, right? So, um, that was a huge shift when that started to happen. But she talked about this experience that, you can hear her describe in the podcast where she had a psychic experience where something came through her, someone communicated through her to a mother, this mother's dead child told her something that was indisputable. And she's like, Ra, I need you to show me where this is in my chart. Because she was feeling a little bit freaked out by the intensity of the experience. And he was like, it's not in your chart. You're just because she was working as a medium for the or as a psychic at some Sedona center, and he said something to the effect of it being her scamming people or something, and that like just devastated her for him to say that. And then somebody else told her, oh, you should ask Dr. Eleanor. And just lo and behold, Dr. Eleanor called that day and she answered the phone. She's like, oh. And Dr. Eleanor looked at her charts and she said, oh, you have almost the entire angelic matrix and da da da. And of course you're psychic, and told her all these wonderful things. So of course she was very interested by this. And that's when Ra was like, no, you have to choose. So, but that's her story. I mean, there's more to it, so I don't want to get all the way into it. But my point is, so yeah, she knows it. But there's parts of it that, so at the end, when we were talking about it, I did say, there was a part of me that was worried, like, okay, so what am I going to do with what Dr. Eleanor is teaching if it's teaching that certain things that I believe? And then I realized that's kind of what I'm experiencing in life, right? Like there are times where you just have to say, here's what I believe is true. And I'm going to take what's valuable of what she's teaching that rings true for me. And I'm going to use that. And people who connect with me in a way where I resonate, I'll mentor them to find what rings true for them. And if we can all just learn to trust ourselves and not need someone else, Ra, Karen, Eleanor, you, me, to be our authority, right? And that's really the thing that I think human design, in its truest experiment, asks us to do.
That phrase, "take what resonates, leave the rest," which I'm sure you've heard, and I don't know if Raw
Right.
said it, but I hear it all the time. There's truth to it. Right? Everything's a frequency vibration. Um, that again, coming back to the Four Agreements book last night, I'm sure Raw read it and remembered it and was channeling that, because in the introduction, one of the last statements, I'm sure I read it last night, was like, it says da 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 da. It talks about, it doesn't use the word conditioning, but it talks about you're being groomed by government, church, and everything. But at the end, it says, "Take what resonates, leave the rest." And I was like, "Isn't that interesting?" That was published in
Well,
1957. So,
okay, but isn't it
right?
also possible that whatever Ra channeled was channeled by Don Miguel Hernandez? What's
Oh,
his
for
name?
sure.
Don Miguel.
Miguel,
Because
yeah.
there's all, there is, I mean, if you think about it, it's like human design is not, it doesn't really have any specific unique components. It's a combination of ancient wisdom traditions
Yeah.
that have been put together in a unique way, but they all take wisdom that people have known or felt or been given or whatever for thousands of years, and it aligns them in ways that helps us see. And so what that shows me is like, okay, just because this human design piece doesn't show me how to put in some other things that are coming, it was like a stepping stone that said, okay, here's all this stuff from the past that people have been using to try to navigate truth. And here's how they all kind of interplay together.
Mm-hmm.
So now take this and teach people the mechanics of this so they can stop screwing up their kids and teaching them all how to be good little soldiers, right? And so we can take that. But now, as we're using that, are we saying that people aren't meant to evolve and have new ways of expanding that? Of course, we're going to all get wiser and smarter, and new downloads are coming in. We've got these people who are channeling all these forms of consciousness. I've been really fascinated with listening to several different people who channel various types of beings, like Bashar and Lee Harris and the Z's. So Daryl
Hicks. Yeah.
Anka is the one who channels Bashar, Lee Harris and the Z's. Of course, Esther Hicks, Abraham Hicks, that channeling experience. And then there are more, but I can't even think of it. But those are the ones that I have really found a lot of resonance, but they don't all agree on the same things. They don't all say exactly the same things, but there's a certain amount of consistency in what they say. And I believe they say different things because they're coming from different vibrations, different frequencies, because they're appealing to people who are at different frequencies, right?
Mhm.
So, we each have a place that we're at a certain frequency, and what the message that we are going to feel, we're not going to be attracted to a frequency that's lower than us, but we're also not going to be able to handle one that's so far up here. So there's all these different ways
Mhm.
of aligning the frequency so that we can find the one that connects with us and helps us to continue to raise ours. And then the people who are coming along with us are usually right there with us, or maybe right below. Sometimes, hopefully we have a good combination of people who are a little bit above and a little bit below, that we're kind of, but you had asked in the beginning about the 7-year cycle
Mhm.
in human design. I don't know if you asked it on camera or off, but I'm now into, well into my 8th year, and I really feel like, I've talked to other people who are far into it. It's a spiral, right? It just goes,
Mhm.
and I think it takes about 7 years to go around, but then we just start going around again. And it's like new level, same devil, right? So you just kind of keep deconditioning things at a bigger and bigger level and a deeper level, in a way that's, people want to have this idea that, okay, in 7 years, it's all going to be good. It's all going to be fixed. So what? So then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You peak in 7 years, and then what? You're just going to sit there? You're not going to continue to grow and evolve? No, we're going to just keep getting higher and higher consciousness, more and more in touch with our true, highest sense of ourself, more and more curious, more and more loving. I don't know. It's going to be cool to see what happens next.
Well, someone said something to me last week. Like consciousness itself has its own frequency band. So never mind the frequency of your body, tuning forks. All like everything is a vibration. Consciousness is also sitting at different frequencies, right? And I never actually thought about consciousness, like the idea of just what we know collectively actually having its own energetic band, and that clicked for me in a big way because I never thought about that before. And I honestly, that's what I feel like I'm seeing. And so Ra in 1987 channeled the frequency of consciousness at the time. And I've heard other people say there were other people that kind of got the same message at the same time, but it killed them. Like it literally, they couldn't take it and they self-destructed. Whereas I've heard him say like he was grizzled enough, his body could handle it. He was the right vessel at the time to get it. And it seems to me that it's like Christ consciousness is really it can be a collective movement. I think that's what's happening right now is people are getting the messages, we're sharing the messages. We're at a time where we can share it through YouTube. I think YouTube is the greatest gift to us right now because literally people are sharing their experiences, and there's some social proof of someone with a thousand or a million likes on a topic. Doesn't mean you should listen to it, but you might give it a little more notice than the TV station or some network that is trying to share some piece of advice for you that you should do that's actually being making money off the
But
back end of advertising, right?
there's a lot of things with a lot of likes that are not of a
Sure.
high level of consciousness, though.
Which is why you need to
So
discern. Yeah.
yeah, and that's where I think discern, though. That's where. So I mentioned Bashar. Do you listen to Bashar at all?
A little bit more so lately, actually. I at first I couldn't handle it, but lately, yeah, it's very interesting.
So Bashar talks about how our mind is like, so our mind is just this little thing inside our higher mind, and then there's our consciousness, and there's like our soul, there's the oversoul, there's all these layers, and the mind is this teeny little thing inside of it, right? So I like the word discern, but a lot of people confuse discern and contemplate with thinking, right?
Different.
And logically trying to figure things out. And so I do like to clarify that. So what I do is just really trust. Like there was some stuff I was listening to that somebody mentioned. Actually, I was listening to something, and I'm not going to mention names, but just somebody mentioned something and held up a book somewhere, and I was like, oh, I don't know that person. And I Googled it, and I or I went to YouTube, saw they had tons of followers and they had this video that was long and lots of people, and he was waiting for now 6,000 people to come on live. And there were things he was saying that I was like, I don't know, this feels off. It wasn't what he was saying, it was his energy, right? And then there were things he was saying that were intriguing, and I was listening and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I even wrote a couple things down that I'll probably look up later. And then there was one point where like it showed his face, and I looked at him and I was like, no. And it wasn't a visual like this guy's weird looking. It was a sense of his energy.
Yep.
And I was just like, no. And I turned it off. And so for me, it's like that, just trusting. That doesn't mean he's a bad person, doesn't mean what he's saying is not valid. But it was, my body was saying, it was like a splenic thing. You know, I do have a defined spleen. I'm not splenic authority, but, or something that just knew, no, that my intuition said, this guy is not someone for you to, this is not where you're meant to listen right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so this discerning of what's really even not what's correct, what's good, what's bad, but like what is it, what's right for us right now? Because there's a lot
Right
of
now.
stuff that we could listen to that we're not ready for.
Yep. And we're
we're
all
just
listening to
wasting our
different things.
time.
Yeah. What is your cognition? Because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I know
Outer
exactly
visions.
what you, outer vision. So
And
mine
so are
is
you.
taste.
No, you're outer visions.
No, I'm taste.
Okay, well then I
Um,
have something wrong in your chart.
you're the second person in a week. Are you using genetic matrix for that?
No,
Because
I'm looking on neutrino
weird.
design.
No, definitely taste cognition.
Neutrino
And
design
I'm
shows you as outer visions.
weird. That's the app I use too, and it doesn't.
February
But
5th, 1972, right?
yep,
Sorry.
12:18 a.m. That's
Yep.
okay.
Oh no,
I'll
that's
share
the
any.
problem. That's the problem. I got the PM in there and I swear you told me AM and I put it in. Let me
Yeah, that's
fix it.
I usually say like 00:18
You
a.m.
did,
anyways.
and I said I can, and I even said I can put in AM, but somehow I think it just sometimes it drags with your finger.
It's
Okay.
happened enough times that it's
All right.
like even Eleanor, when she was looking at my chart, she's like, "That's not right," and she was like
Taste.
flustered for about 5 minutes looking at. So yeah, when we all are experiencing life differently from a different lens, right? Every one of us is
Mhm.
different, and there's so many things we can talk about that. I mean, I remember reading something the other day where someone on LSD, that's what a quad right experiences life as. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. But I've been on LSD, and I was like, life is very different in that with that lens.
Okay,
But
but is the LSD the same for a quad left as it is for a quad right? So I don't know. Like,
I
how
have no
can you
idea.
even say? Like, right? I don't know.
But I could say, I've experimented with various medicines, and LSD is a very different experience, like where you are absolutely experiencing life differently, like on a completely different level. And I've met a few quad rights, and now when I think about in conversation with them what they seem to be experiencing at the same time I am, I'm like, you see the world so differently than me. It's really strange. But oh man, I lost my train of thought. There goes the squirrel again. But I want to,
It's
anyways, I'm having
okay. If
fun.
it's important, it'll come back. Trust.
Yeah. Had I gone the quad right LSD, that's not where I wanted to go with that.
You were asking about my cognition when I was talking about
Oh,
seeing
right.
that person, and I said I was outer vision. You said you were taste. That's where we were
Because
before that.
when you're taking in information, you should take in what's not. There's the word should. I would hope people would take in information based on what feels right for them. So it's a response or whatever. So with me, I've been experimenting with taste for about a year now, since I've kind of been more aware of what that was. And Leanne Wolf said something really interesting to me one day. She was like, "Taste people's words. If what they're saying sounds bitter or sounds sweet, that's part of my intuitive awareness. And because I've got gate 57, my right ear, like I won't take phone calls with my phone in my left hand. It's either earpods in or speakerphone on, because the conversation will be very different, especially if it involves getting information that might contain risk, that I now realize in my life is such a huge thing because I can hear the nuances. So never mind that right ear being like, I can hear the slightest warble, and being gate 13 is my personality sun. The number of people that I have shocked by just like, they'll make a sentence, and I'll hear one word where their voice rattles, and I'll ask about that word, and the tears just immediately, and they don't think that word was important, but whatever it was, all of a sudden they're a puddle in front of me. It's very weird. But so I've learned that that acoustic intuition that I have is powerful. So when I now absorb content, I'm looking for things that are to my taste, and I accept that that's part of my intake process, right? So someone that doesn't resonate for me this week, like you said, it's not never, but right
Hmm.
now, this message isn't for me. And so I
Right.
just accept that and I stop wasting my time. I'll bookmark it, which I never return to. So I've learned like if it's important, it will come back. Is what
Right.
I've learned to trust. Because otherwise I'll go crazy making lists of things I should watch one day, and I was doing that for decades.
Right.
Like I should do this. I'm like, no, I shouldn't. It doesn't interest me. No, it might later, and it usually does later. So maybe outer vision. You say inner or outer vision?
Outer.
Outer. So I have no idea what that experience is like, but I've run into enough people lately that I wish I could have someone explain what outer vision means to them.
Well, it was another one of those things that when I understood it, I was like, oh, now I feel so much better about who I am and I can really embrace it.
Mhm.
Right. Because I used to think that I was a snob because I really cared about what it looked like.
Hmm.
Like, oh, don't put that, like, somebody be helping me in the kitchen and they would put food on a plate that it didn't look good on. I'd be like, no, you can't. Right. It's like, everything everything mattered and people would be like, it's not Pinterest. I'm like, I don't know, but like, and now to be told that when I eat it needs to be visually appealing, right? And like literally today when I got dressed, we were going to my husband and I went out as the one of the local primaries, so we went out to vote, and I just got dressed quick when we went this morning, and I put on a different green shirt. Green's one of my favorite colors, but it's a shirt I've had for a long time, and it's like a duller. It's more like this kind of a green, right? It's this little frame back here.
Avocado
And
kind of thing.
yeah, and I was like, and I put it on, and as we went out, and as I came back, and I was just like, I need to change my shirt. And I realized that I understood it even more because I watched a video that did speak to me that there's a woman, she's been on my podcast and she's very active in my Facebook group. Her name is Monica Bravo, and she's a emotional manifester, but she has that 45-21 defined will, very forceful manifester energy, right? And she's a self-proclaimed polymath. She knows so many different things. But she shared this video and she shares so much that oftentimes I don't pay any attention to, I don't have time, whatever. But I
Mhm.
just felt this desire to watch this video she shared. And it was so resonant. It was all about frequencies, and it talked about the frequencies of sound, the frequencies of color, talked about the effect of frequencies on water, on our food, on our bodies, in all these ways that were just really, really resonant, no pun intended, right? But it really was cool. And I thought about it and I was like, you know, that's the difference. The brighter colors really impact me. I've been, whenever since I started my business, I chose a palette of brand colors, and they're pretty much the colors I'm wearing. This green's a little bit duller than what I sometimes choose, but they're like these bright spring, um, they're these colors, right? This is my daughter actually made that picture in eighth grade. She's 23 now. And when I was trying to find my correct outer visions for the background for my podcast and stuff, I was like, I need something more colorful than what I had there. And then I was like, this is perfect. But so it's really about my surroundings. So I realized the importance of feng shui in my visuals of my surroundings. Um, and the things that I see, and people like seeing people is really important for me to get their energy. I am much better at picking up, although I can pick up like seeing people's chart. I seeing people's words is a little bit harder for me to get the nuance of the energy, but a lot of my intuition comes from what I see. I don't see
You
the
see
future
auras?
or any. No, I do not yet.
No. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
and I
that. Not
say
yet.
that.
Working on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not actually working on. I'm open to it because
Mhm.
part of the
Sure.
reason I probably don't is because I am really aware. I've been told by many, many other people's spirit guides that when they give me messages, like I'll be talking to someone and I have a friend and she's like, I'm sensing somebody, da da da. This whole thing, we turned out it was my brother. And I was like, why is he talking to you? Why doesn't he talk to me? And he said, because he can't get through. Your mind is too busy. And that's a thing, busy, busy, busy. And I can feel that in you a little bit too, where we have this desire to know, and we know we have this expansive ability to hold these huge, big ideas. So then we put so much time and energy into the ideas that we don't connect with the energy and the spirit enough. I don't know. You might be better at it than I am, but that's part of my thing is I I don't see the auras, but I'm starting to feel like that will happen, that I can start to sense the energy. I will oftentimes be talking to somebody and just feel something and just know that, oh, yeah, there's something off with that person. And sometimes I've known, I think I need to do some kind of like cleanse. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. It means that I'm not saying that. It's just, you know, and I will say that a lot of people who are searching so much and they do a lot of even plant medicine, but people who do a lot of drugs, like Rod did a lot of drugs.
Mhm.
And so even though he had all this good stuff that came through, he had a lot of dark energy that um, kind of stayed with him from a lot of those experiences where he wasn't in the right place with a lot of those things. So
Yeah, I don't think he was
anyway,
doing any work in that space. That's for sure. It didn't
yeah,
seem that was his interest to him. So
yeah,
yeah, no, yeah, you get upgrades the more you dig in. Like
yeah.
when I think about my intuition 3 years ago, I wouldn't have said I had any, or I wouldn't have really understood what the word was. Like I would have known the dictionary sense, but to me now, I know the right ear. It was through plant medicine that I felt it, saw it, and then was like, oh, cool. Now, how do I tap into that? Right? Like I've told the story before, but I'm a drummer for 46 years, hard hitter. My mother was a health and safety consultant, and like when I was 10, 12 or 13, she came home with all the hearing stuff to test how loud the environment was that I was drumming in. And she put these meters in. And she was like, you play at a level that's the equivalent of standing inside the engine of a 747. Like you, and I just did that my whole life and assumed I had hearing issues and assumed that. And like as I got older, I was like reading people's lips, but it wasn't any of that at all. It turned out it was a trauma. It was tied to, and digging into my metaphysical book and through a couple of experiences, realized that holy shit, I every time I got my ears tested, I would pass tests. Yet I would feel like I couldn't hear things. But listening to people was agonizing because with that 13, I was getting everybody's stories. Like I've heard so many stories that aren't mine that get dumped on me energetically that became too much. And then one night in a mushroom experience, I went from being I can't hear to being able to hear my wife and son's conversation word for word at another end of our house through three closed doors, including like one of those sealed hard garage doors, like a solid wood core door. And I could hear them like they were in the next room. And I was like, that is really interesting. So then I followed that up, followed the right ear trauma. It's always you're always listening for danger, so you don't actually hear anything else. And then being like, oh my god, I've been doing that my whole life. And just by acknowledging that, working through it, processing it somatically, my hearing improved
How
50%.
long how long ago have you, would you say that really started to improve?
Probably going on 2 years now. But that's
Because,
been evolution.
I also, you keep saying, I know your conscious son is the 13, but you also have the other gate, the 33, it's your design south node. So it forms that full channel. And with that being the gate of privacy, with the urge to retreat and reflect, but it's your south node. So as you move further from your Uranus opposition further on, You don't have so much of that need to pull back. So there might be this, if you're hearing all these things that you're not really capable of hearing, there's this need to retreat. So your body might be retreating even within keeping you from hearing it. But as you have learned to grow into trusting yourself, and as you're moving into the lessons of your North Node, which is what, 19? Oh, that gate of sensitivity. Interesting on that side. So yeah, so just now you're moving into, being more sensitive to what's being said, and, your natural abilities to be in that environment, an environment of sensitivity. So,
Well, and that word discernment, like discerning what's mine and what's just let it go by. I've learned to be a filter, not a sponge, like emotionally and everything. So, you mentioned earlier, like this energy that people just dumped on me, I need to get rid of it. Like I have to almost imagine like a waterfall, a cloak, whatever. I've got this little aura spray, which just
I don't
smells
think I
nice.
mentioned that. I think you mentioned that.
No, earlier you said something about I'm sure you said it. I know I was thinking it, but yeah, just having this, you're in a conversation with someone and it's like, oh, that was their energy, but it's on me. I need to get it off.
Oh, okay. I guess maybe it's the word, like the language of the energy they dumped on you just didn't feel like something I would say. I think you're talking about, yeah, when I was talking about with the ajna, and you're
Mm.
talking to somebody and you feel that energy of theirs, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because you're going to get that
Yeah.
energy by vibe, by auditory, by what you see, like whatever form that energy came in, it's there, and it's, do I want this or do I want to discard it, or should I discard it? So. Hmm.
Well, the energy is there, whether, in any given form. It's just the frequency will determine whether it's auditory, So, but I don't know if this was you and I talking about it before we got on, or if it was someone else, but the defined ajna has such an impact on us
Mhm.
that we don't even know. Like, my husband has a defined ajna. My sister, who I mentioned, she has a defined ajna. And I literally, probably about 3.5 years into my experiment, had this like, and I started to hear the Talking Heads song in my head. This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. How did I get here? Because I'm like, these are not my thoughts. These are not how did I make all these decisions? How did I make all these choices that didn't really even reflect me? They were just like, I just was like going with the flow because this is in my head, that this is what we're going to do today. This is what it was like. I was working on autopilot, almost like programmed by, and it was really the huge difference in the thought process of my husband and my sister, who are the two people who I am impacted by the most. My sister lives in Thailand, so we're never all together. I talk to her all the time on Messenger, and I still feel the impact of her defined ajna through our conversations, right? Because time and space is just an illusion. Um, so, and my husband, of course, and I'm a triple split. He bridges all my splits. So, man, he definitely just, without doing anything, just smothers me, right? Like I'm just constantly rebelling against everything he says. But it's like, oh man, I need to go walk around the store. Yesterday I spent like 2 hours at TJ Maxx to kind of like connect to all the different auras. Um, and but my sister would have an opinion on something, so because she's very woo-woo, metaphysical, different, and he's very logical, very first line, whatever. And so one would have such an extreme difference in opinion than the other. It was really easy for me to start to realize that, oh, yeah, that's her thoughts. Oh, yeah, those are his thoughts. Where am I? Like, I didn't even know. And then I realized, I don't care. Doesn't matter. I don't, and it's not that I
Mm.
don't have an opinion. I do have opinions, but most things that I thought I had opinions about were really just me parroting back somebody else's opinion that I thought was mine. My sense of certainty, because it felt like the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And it's caused me to have to pull back from a lot of groups because I would start to question things and be like, well, why? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and it's like the political divisiveness, right? Like I have very definite opinions on things I think are right and wrong, but I'm not going to say that I think that each person who disagrees with me on one issue then is no longer relevant to me, right? And I think there are a lot of people who still do that. Like, oh, well, I found out they voted for so and so, so now I don't talk to them anymore. And I'm like, really? So
Well, that was
yeah,
happening a lot a couple of years ago for sure. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
I'm sure it'll
it's
be
like
happening again.
it's
So,
going to be a very interesting 6 months, that's for sure.
right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Um, how are you doing for time? You got energy still? I'm.
I am actually always down to talk, but I think I'm getting to the point where we should probably wrap things up.
Well,
Just
none of
for
my
my
questions that I was going to ask you, I got to, and that was still super interesting. So,
Okay, well, is
um,
there one of those or so that you still want to address? Because I can probably do
I
one
mean, I
more.
kind of like the one question I had at the end that I thought is a good question to ask, and I'm probably going to try to remember to do that every time. If you had three pieces of advice to give to another 6'2" emotional projector that doesn't know it yet, what would you highlight? And how would you catch their attention? Right? I mentioned that profile might be an artifact and all that stuff, but like it was someone's asking a 3-5 kind of question that like it was like, whoa, what did you just say? That like it caught my attention. So it's a parlor trick. It's more than a parlor trick. I don't mean to dismiss it, but I mean it's what piece of advice would you give a 6'2" motion projector, and but how would you in that how would you catch their attention, right? You need to be invited for one, or you invite yourself by saying, hey, can I make an observation, which I find is very
Well,
effective.
if I know they're a 6'2", if I know they're a 6'2" emotional projector and they don't know anything about it, then I probably already have had the invitation to see their chart in some way, shape, or form. So let's assume that that's there, that there's an opening there. But here's the thing, I understand where you're going with this question, and I don't want to try to sound like I'm skirting it, but there is no one answer, right? There is no, and that's the thing, is um, like I don't know what's going to get their attention until I know where
Mm-hmm.
they need attention, where they want attention. Especially as a 6'2", the very first thing I want to do, I mean, as a projector, the very first thing I want to do is make sure that they feel seen. And
Mm-hmm.
so not knowing the specifics of them, to try to say that I can make every projector feel seen in the same way is very limiting, because if you're a self-projected projector versus your splenic projector, right? You're going to have a really different sense of what reality has been like for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that for a projector, if I'm talking to a projector, the first thing I'm going to probably do is encourage them to talk,
Mm-hmm.
because the projector needs to feel seen, recognized, and they need to express themselves. So knowing that that's okay, and that people who don't want to hear what they have to say are probably not the right people, or at least not the right people for that setting at that time and place. That doesn't mean they're bad people. So I often use the expression, I tell projectors that they have this energy that's focused and absorbing. It's very penetrating, and it's really deep and intense. And so realize that that needs permission, and that's not about you being subservient to them. But penetration without permission is never okay, right? It's just not okay. So, I would talk to them about the idea of honoring themselves enough to know not to waste their energy somewhere where someone's not ready or able to receive it. And
Yeah.
then, so that would be, I guess, not wasting your energy where people are not ready or able to receive it is the way that I would present that. And then the other thing I would say is to realize that the hermiting, the second line part, is really about just being you. And that's part of being the role model too. So it's about doing what comes naturally and doing it for its own sake, on your own, independent of other people's interference in interactions. And that's when you really recharge your aura in a way that makes you magnetic. Because when you're doing you, man, you're going to be telling people, go away. I just don't want to be bothered, because they are drawn to it. Right. So that's there's probably
Cool.
3 things in there somewhere, even though I just rolled them all into a monologue like I like to do. So,
No, and I appreciate you explaining. Like you mentioned earlier, like you do intuitive readings, right? And so that's a hard question when I'm saying
yeah,
like, hey, you just met someone, and but
yeah.
yeah, because it's kind of the same question. Like, well, if you need to go, say so. But like, what would you say to a parent of a 6'2" emotional projector, where they're struggling, kids young, not ready to you know understand all that. Because I know what I would say to a parent of a 3'5", because I've said it many times on Facebook and been thanked for just saying, just with your kids, it's feedback, not failure. Like
Right.
it will ruin them. It set me back 40 years. Like the faint times of my life where I learned. I won't go into it here, but
Yeah.
it ruined me. So,
Well,
and it's taken a long time to recover. So,
the sixth line child is a third line child without the
sure.
third line resilience. So I would tell them that whole thing of like, there is no failure. There are things you learn from it, and those things are going to serve you really well in life. Later, you're going to be able to look at those things. And then I would just really focus on what do you want to do? What feels natural to you? That like where, and the honoring the alone time when they want it. Although a lot of times the 6'2" doesn't necessarily need to be alone. They just need to be with their family alone, and they need their own space where they can go be alone. But, so I would probably tell them a lot of that same thing. And then for the parent of any projector child, I really caution them to not tell them that they don't have sustainable energy, because even though it's technically true, it's really a limiting label. So their energy is amplifying the energy of the sacrals around them. And
Mm.
so right now I could sit and talk to you and I can go and go, but I need to respect that I have a time limit and I want to go and disperse this. And then I'm going to go talk to this mental projector friend of mine who is going to feel all this stuff vibrating if I come into it with all this, right? So just the
They're gonna
idea
feel
of,
me.
yeah, they will.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit of you coming through still, right? Because
Yeah.
I'll be carrying that with me. So,
Mm.
but really just trusting, and Kieran Curry Parker in that conversation talks about what it's been like for her to raise her daughter, who is the one child that she's had since she learned human design. So she's known within 10 minutes of her daughter's birth that she's a projector. And I don't remember what her profile is, but how amazing it is and how kind of scary it is to raise someone she said, what she said, something about smarter than that, infinitely smarter than you are. And I don't know that smarter is necessarily the right word, but there is an innate wisdom in the projector energy that comes from being able to see into a person. So respecting that wisdom and not feeling threatened by it and dismissed, and then recognizing it and inviting the child to recognize when something feels in alignment and not in alignment for them, so that they don't, and if they don't have clarity, giving them some time, just honoring their way, not trying to control them. And that's true with any kid, just not seeing it as our job is to basically, we just talked about this on a call I was on earlier with some other human design folks that I chat with on once a week. And we were talking about how if we could just get people to see that really as parents, our job is to adore our kids, keep them alive, keep them fed, and allow them to learn from what does and doesn't work in a way that feels in alignment for them, and not try to teach them, some of the stupid things that we teach kids that are all part of the whole conditioning process. We were talking about that, and I'm not going to go into that rabbit hole, but a lot of them, when you think about it, I get why we do it, but please, when you bring your kid over to my house, don't expect me to make my kid give your kid their favorite toy to play with. I would not give you my favorites. I'm sitting here reading a book and you come over. I wouldn't hand you my book and say, I'll read a different book.
Mhm.
You would never expect that. So it's just this whole way that we teach kids. So I'm, again, Chatty Kathy.
No, it's
So
cool. And I won't ask you then, but I will. Now that you know because I'm sure you were a manifesting generator in the total integrated vehicle with Eleanor's work, right? You're a projector, still a projector. And like back to your comment earlier, where you said, like, I've done all this work. I teach and consult in human design. Do I need to change? And of course you don't. It's just more information, a slightly different lens and angle. You're still a
but
projector in the mental world, but have you, see, I won't ask this question, but like, do you feel more empowered? Are you exploring the fact that
I'm
you
still,
got?
I'm still collecting, and I'm waiting for clarity on that, but it resonates because I've had many people say, are you sure you're not a manifesting generator? And I'm like, well, I've been conditioned by manifesting generators my whole life, so I thought that's what it was. But there is a part of me that understands the key part that the projector role plays mentally, and
Still a
how
thing.
that is really the doorway. And that is the thing that I really believe, that the traditional and quantum chart, that one that I'm working with, is the doorway, because we are meeting everybody in the mental world. And as we move beyond that, then we can move into those things. And I don't understand that well enough to know where that's going to take me. But it is going to take me somewhere. And I'm talking to Eleanor in August. I'm also talking to Leanne Wolf, who you mentioned. So
Oh, good.
that'll be cool. And we'll have to have you. Did I send you a thing yet? Are you scheduled for my podcast? Because I
I think
would
so.
love to have you on. If it
Yeah, I'll do
feels,
that.
I would love
If
to
there's
do
other
it. I'll
people you
have
want
to.
to connect with, my fractal seems to be finding all sorts of eclectic people. So if you're,
Okay. I will send you a link. And I think I'm right now booking for like late August, because I only do one a week. So,
good for you.
um, so yeah. We'll see where that goes, because one a week, giving up every Sunday, though, it right has not felt like giving up. It's been fun, but there's a part of me that's like, maybe I should think about doing some other days. But all right, I am going to really run now. So
Okay. Really
okay, I'll
nice
hold
chatting
on.
with you. I'm gonna do that little intro thing.
Okay.